All right, so today we're diving into the Roman Empire. And I don't just mean gladiators and chariots, as cool as those are. I mean, this is a civilization that controlled more land than even Alexander the Great. And the really crazy part is they did it in a way that lasted for centuries. We're using Edward Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire today to dig into how they built such an incredible, long-lasting power structure.
Yeah, Gibbon does a great job in the book. He really highlights what made Rome different from those flash-in-the-pan empires. Like when you think about Alexander the Great or the Mongols, they rose fast and fell even faster. Rome, they were playing the long game. And their strategy is, honestly, it's amazing. It's really fascinating how they approached it.
So what was their secret sauce? What set Rome apart and allowed them to create something so lasting?
It all boils down to one word: unity. They created this system, and it's honestly kind of surprising how forward-thinking it seems in some ways, especially for its time.
Okay, now you've got to give me some details. What kind of system are we talking about here?
Take religion, for example. Now, in the ancient world, religious intolerance was basically the norm. But the Romans, they were surprisingly chill about the different faiths within their empire. They didn't go around forcing everyone to adopt their gods. In fact, sometimes they even, get this, they incorporated foreign gods into their own pantheon.
Wow, so they were almost like, hey, if it works, it works. Like, they understood the benefits of letting people hold on to their own beliefs.
Exactly. They were pragmatic, which was pretty revolutionary back then. And, this is key, it was effective. Gibbon talks about how this avoided a lot of internal conflict that tore apart other empires. Imagine conquering a new territory and not immediately having to stamp out a religious uprising. That's what incorporating local deities allowed. It's a lesson a lot of empires after Rome, well, they didn't quite learn, did they?
It's true. It seems obvious in hindsight, but I guess that's why we're studying history, right?
Yeah.
So keeping the peace by being pretty flexible about religion, that's one thing. What else did they do?
Let's talk about citizenship for a second. Becoming a Roman citizen, that wasn't just some symbolic thing. It came with real perks.
Like what?
You name it. Legal protections, rights, even economic advantages.
And they offered this to the people they conquered, even people who they were literally at war with not that long ago.
You got it. It was brilliant when you think about it. It was the ultimate way to integrate conquered people into Roman society. Let me give you an example. You could have had Gauls who fought against Julius Caesar. And then just a couple generations later, their descendants could be sitting in the Roman Senate.
Now that's just wild. So it's like by offering citizenship, they were essentially giving these people a share in the system. They weren't just living under Roman rule. They were becoming a part of it.
Right. It's all about buy-in and the sense of belonging. They took it even further through the spread of Latin. Gibbon writes, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but he essentially says that the Romans knew language had power. They knew it could shape national identity.
Yeah, language is powerful stuff.
Tell me about it. Latin became the language of law, of administration, of trade. Yeah. It was how they connected this vast, crazy, diverse empire.
That's incredible. They managed to use language to create a shared culture and identity, and on such a massive scale.
Exactly. They knew that true power wasn't just about military strength. It was about shaping the way people thought and interacted. And language, well, that was a powerful tool to do just that.
So we've got this massive empire, right? It's well connected. It's a blend of all these different cultures and languages. And it's all held together by this, honestly, surprisingly forward-thinking system. I don't know about you, but I'm finding it hard to picture what daily life was actually like. What was it actually like to live in Roman society?
All right, so picture this. Imagine a world where cities weren't these isolated things, but they were all part of this huge, interconnected, bustling network. Gibbon mentions that there were, get this, over 11,197 cities in Italy alone. And we're not talking about tiny villages here. These were centers of trade, of culture, you name it, all linked by those incredibly well-built Roman roads.
Oh, yeah, those roads were amazing. I mean, talk about an engineering marvel. Some of them are still around today.
It's true. They were built to last. And it wasn't just about transporting goods, right? They allowed for ideas to spread, for innovation to happen. It was how they connected people across this massive empire. And get this, at its peak. Gibbon estimates that the Roman Empire may have had a population of around 120 million people.
120 million. Wow. To put that in perspective, that's almost twice the population of the United States when it was founded. It's mind-blowing when you think about the sheer scale of it all.
Absolutely. And especially considering they didn't have all the technology we have today, right?
Yeah.
It really says something about their ingenuity, their organizational skills. But, as with any society, it wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Of course not. So it wasn't all about perfectly built roads and efficient systems. What about the everyday lives of the people living in this system?
Well, you see this really interesting dynamic between private wealth and public good. On one hand, you had emperors funding these huge, ambitious projects, but then you also had wealthy citizens who felt a responsibility to support their communities.
So it's almost like ancient crowdfunding for aqueducts and amphitheaters.
Yeah, in a way. It was a matter of civic pride. Let me give you an example. Herodes Atticus. This guy was incredibly wealthy, lived in Athens in the 2nd century AD, inherited a fortune, and he used a lot of it to fund projects all over the empire. Stadiums, theaters, even an aqueduct. And we're not talking about small-scale stuff either. He used the best materials, cutting-edge design.
Wow, he sounds kind of like the Andrew Carnegie or Bill Gates of his time. It's these kinds of stories like this Herodes Atticus guy that really bring history to life.
I agree. It makes it feel real, tangible. But while individuals like Herodes Atticus show us the generosity that existed in Roman society, we also have to acknowledge the, shall we say, the less glamorous side of things. As with many empires, Roman society was built on a foundation that relied heavily on slavery.
Right, it's important to remember that. And Gibbon definitely doesn't shy away from that aspect in his book.
He doesn't, and it's a good reminder that even with all of Rome's achievements, there were these stark inequalities. Slavery in Rome, it was complicated, always evolving. You had people working as domestic servants, but also huge numbers forced to work in mines, on farms. It's a reminder that even with all the advancements, there were always people being left behind.
It's kind of wild when you think about it. Even with all of Rome's accomplishments, their successes might have actually played a role in their downfall. It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher, this idea that what makes a society strong can also be its weakness. It's a pattern we see throughout history,
For sure. Speaking of patterns, Gibbon talks about this idea of peace contributing to Rome's decline. But how can peace be a bad thing? It doesn't really track.
Right. It's not that peace is inherently bad. It's more about what happens when you have a long period of stability without any real conflict or threats. Gibbon argues that without that external pressure, the Romans, they kind of lost their edge.
Interesting.
He says this led to a decline in their military readiness and in how much people participated in civic life.
So all that resilience and drive that got them to that point, it just kind of faded away because they didn't have to fight for survival as much.
Yeah, essentially. Think about it. You have a citizen soldier, someone defending their home, their family, their whole way of life, versus a professional soldier who, war is just a job for them.
Yeah.
Gibbon suggests that shift from citizen armies to a professional military had a huge impact on Roman society.
I can see that for sure. There's a big difference between being ready to personally defend your community and relying on someone else to do it.
Absolutely. And this shift wasn't just happening in the military. Gibbon points out this kind of intellectual stagnation that starts creeping in during this time period.
Stagnation? How?
People weren't producing original work, at least not as much in literature and philosophy.
So instead of pushing boundaries and coming up with new ideas, they were just repackaging old ones.
Exactly. Gibbon quotes Longinus, a critic who lived during that time, and he's lamenting the lack of originality. He compares it to something that stopped growing, saying their works were of diminutive stature. Ouch. He thought this lack of original thought, it came from the stability and uniformity of Roman rule, ironically.
Wow. So the comfort and security they achieved might have actually stifled their drive to question and innovate.
It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, can any civilization, no matter how successful or well-designed, ever really escape this kind of cycle?
That's the million-dollar question Gibbon leaves us with, and it's a question that feels just as relevant today as it did centuries ago. When we dig into the how and why of Rome's decline, we end up understanding not just history better, but also human nature and the challenges that every civilization faces.
It's certainly a humbling thought. It reminds us that nothing lasts forever, and that even the most powerful societies can crumble. If Rome could fall, what does that say about us? And what can we learn from their mistakes? Lots to think about.
Always is.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, isn't it? They always leave us with more questions than answers. But hey, that's what keeps things interesting, right? Till next time.